Hello, and thank you for joining me again. So I made the video in 2017. As I said in that video, it wasn't intended to be hugely comprehensive, and no doubt there will be things that I left out. Um, so I wanted to speak about 2018, this year ahead, and my hopes and feelings about the year ahead. Geopolitically speaking, domestically speaking, but also personally for this channel and what I intend with this channel. So, there's already two ongoing situations in Iran and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In both countries, there are ongoing protests. In Iran, they appear to be the largest scale protests since the Green Movement of 2009. So that's going to be a situation I imagine is going to be watched very closely. In the DRC, I think the issue is that with the step down in Mugabe last year in Zimbabwe, there's going to be increasing pressure and focus on Africa's so-called strongmen, autocratic leaders. Kabila has been in power since 2001, and there is growing anger at his rule. Apparently, 7 people have been killed, some of them near churches or in churches. One man said even in the days of Mobutu that wouldn't have happened. So the DRC is a country with a long and very, very troubled history. So I hope this can pave the way for something good can come out of this. Whether that be Kabila stepping down because the people don't want him anymore, peaceful transfer of power, who knows? But given the recent history of the DRC, let's hope it doesn't turn into another war, full scale war involving the whole country. Um, but there is optimism to be had as well. George Weah has become president in Liberia, the former professional footballer, and apparently it's the first peaceful transition of power in that country for some time. So that's good news, and I wish Mr. Weah and particularly the people of Liberia a positive future. It's certainly a country that needs it. Two brutal civil wars and Ebola and crippling poverty. So Liberia really needs good news. Um, Looking around the world, I'm not going to say I wish for world peace because it isn't going to happen. There's about 200 countries in the world, and unfortunately, I think Plato was probably correct if he is indeed the original architect of the phrase, only the dead have seen the end of war. Now, on one hand, that's a very cynical way to look at things. On the other hand, there is some optimism because there are long running conflicts in the world that are finally starting to come to an end. I'm thinking of the long running conflict in Colombia that really does look to be winding down. These things never happen overnight. It's never a case of war one day, peace the next. It's never quite like that. But certainly, if you were to compare Colombia today to, say, 20 or 30 years ago, I think you'd see it's a much better situation. Um, there's other parts of the world where the situation has changed quite dramatically in 2017. If we look at the brutal wars in Syria and Iraq, there may actually be some cause for optimism this year. ISIS has been defeated more or less in both countries. Um, of the two, peace in Iraq would be even more poignant in a way because whilst the war in Syria is certainly brutal, Iraq has seen nothing but war and instability for 40 years, war, dictatorship, and instability. So there might finally be coming a time when that country is seeing a brighter future. ISIS has been defeated. There doesn't appear to be any major presence other than ISIS of international terror groups operating within Iraq. Um, there may be volatile situations with the Kurdish situation, but Iraq needs some degree of stability after years of bloody warfare and sectarianism, many thousands killed. To have some optimism would be a good thing, to have some sense that there might actually be a way forward where it's it finds some degree of stability. As for Syria, I've said in other videos, there's no easy answer to the Syria situation because many Syrians find themselves, they detest both the Islamist groups like ISIS and the Assad regime. Um, there are no doubt going to be things continuing this year. Unfortunately, human rights abuses, autocracy, dictatorship. But there are signs to be optimistic. The global trend actually towards dictatorship is in decline. Whilst there are certainly leaders who are autocratic, including in countries that are, at least on paper, democracies, the overall trend is against the strongman model, is against this idea of a single person having such dominance. The global trend is in that direction, but it's not the whole picture. In China, Xi Jinping is wielding more power than any Chinese leader since Mao, and that does raise some concerns. However, keeping with China, there is one piece of good news that I have just read in the Times, and that is that from now on, as of midnight last night, the ivory trade is now formally illegal in China. This this is hugely important because if it is enforced, and that's a big caveat, if the law is enforced, then it will hopefully decline this grotesque market that sees thousands of elephants and rhinos killed every year. China is the world's biggest market for legal trade, and up until now, it went through some sort of legal loophole. Although the authorities did say that they made signs that they were going to act on this. So I definitely welcome this. It's a good thing. I just hope that it is enforced, and anyone who's involved in this trade faces serious penalties because it's a grotesque trade, and if it isn't enforced, then we're going to see a situation where these creatures are extinct within our lifetime. So definitely that's something to be welcomed. Um, what else in terms of the world stage? In the UK, I think Brexit is going to continue. I think the negotiations are going to continue to be complicated. Um, what do I hope geopolitically, socially for the world? Well, I would like to see a decrease in the divisiveness of identity politics. I hope we have now got to a point where we're beyond all the Oscars so white thing and men versus women and all this nonsense. Um, it's not that there aren't legitimate issues around those things, but I've made my views very clear. I think that identity politics does a lot more harm than good. Um, 2017 was the year of feminism. Well, I hope that certain aspects of that have reached a peak now, where we're going to start having mature civil discussions about problems rather than just yelling at each other. For the US, I would like to see a situation where, frankly, people just calm down a bit and deal with their differences by civil discourse rather than just yelling in each other's faces. 2017 in America, in Britain, and other parts of the world saw plenty of protests. Protests can have its use, protests can be a powerful tool, but sometimes you also need to just consider the other person's point of view and calm down a bit. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. This doesn't apply in every situation. There are parts of the world I absolutely believe people need to be very vocal and stand up for their rights. But I think that sometimes people get into angry confrontations. It's almost a tribal mentality. And in the US in particular, sometimes it seems, you get alt right protests versus alt left protests just for the sake of it. It's like I would use a football analogy in the UK where you have two rival teams of football supporters. And to me, it would be a case of let one have their protest and, speak against them. But to me, it's it's not always necessary to get into these face-to-face confrontations because when it turns into fist fighting and vandalism and anger and violence, it's not going to achieve a damn thing. It just isn't. All that's going to do is polarize people even further, make people more bitter and more angry, and divide people. So in 2018, I'm not so naive to think that there won't be divisions this year, but I do hope that we grow up a little bit and just think about problems rather than making sweeping statements, rather than getting into this tribalized identity politics like you white people, you black people, you men, you women, etc. That's something I would really like to see this year. Here in the UK, I really, really hope any questions of our constitutional situation really do phase out. There is a possibility that we will have another general election, which I've mixed views on. General elections are important for democracy, but they can also stir up a lot of division. I do think if there is another general election and Jeremy Corbyn's Labour once again lose, Labour will need to seriously look at itself and its way forward. Um, but Theresa May and her party also, I think they've been pandering too much to the hard Brexit side of things. And on the domestic front, I would like to see a more compassionate government, frankly. There are certain issues to do with welfare, in particular. I think I have huge skepticism with the Tories and their attitude to it. But one good thing that Labour has done is change the narrative. A few years ago, we would have been hearing a lot about lazy dole scroungers, right? Um, what Labour has successfully done is change that narrative so that there isn't these sort of sweeping statements, and that's probably a good thing. Well, it is a good thing from my perspective because there's nothing worse, in my opinion, when leaders go out of their way to pander to tabloid populism. Leaders need to be hard headed, they need to make difficult decisions, and sometimes they need to make unpopular decisions. But I would like to see a situation where the influence of tabloid editors decreases or continues to decrease in this country because actually it is less than it used to be. In the world of sport, well, I mostly follow boxing. I'm trying to think of big fights signed up for this year. I can't think of many actually that immediately come to mind. 2017, and I probably should have included this in my review. There really were some classics. Joshua versus Klitschko, Mayweather versus McGregor. Whatever you think of that, whether you think it was a circus or not, it was memorable. Pacquiao versus Horn. I'm going to be watching Jeff Horn. I think the Hornet has a lot of potential. What else were there? Chavez versus Canelo, Canelo versus Golovkin, Hay versus Bellew. So 2017 was a great year for boxing, in my opinion. Um, Also in sport, the Winter Olympics are coming up this month or next month in Pyeongchang, South Korea. I hope that all goes well. One good thing about New Year's Eve and Christmas in the UK, in the year that saw a lot of terrorism, both events went by trouble free in terms of there being no terrorist attacks. So huge respect to the security services. I really do think that people take for granted just how much work these people do into keeping us safe. You know, when terrorist attacks happen, they're heavily criticized. Why was this person under the radar, etc. But people do forget the fact that they also prevent a lot of attacks and they keep us safe every second of every day. We should be grateful for that. That's it, really. I'm not going to say too much more because most of the year is still ahead, so anything can happen. Politically, like I say, we may have a general election. Russia will have a presidential election. Putin will almost certainly win. I'll almost certainly be making a video about that closer to the time. It will be interesting to see how things develop there. 2018 will see a lot of anniversaries. It will be a centenary since the assassination of the Romanovs. It will be 10 years since huge disasters in Burma with Cyclone Nargis and in China with the Sichuan earthquake. And I'm sure there will be many other anniversaries coming up. Lockerbie, 30 years it will be at the end of this year since the Lockerbie bombing. There's also many other poignant events. I always find that interesting to have a sort of scope of time. Um, Now, I'll just close this video by speaking briefly about the direction I want to take with my channel. Um, Firstly, thank you very much for everyone who watches this. I um, I appreciate all of yous, and I appreciate people watching even if you disagree with what I'm saying. I will say this: I know a lot of people make comments on my channel, and sometimes it may look like I'm not responding to people. That's not deliberate. It's simply about practicality. I make a lot of videos, but I have a life outside YouTube, so I simply can't reply to every single comment all the time. Also, if it's a particularly contentious issue, it's a bit like the analogy, boxers say, I let my fists do the talking. Well, for me, I prefer to basically say my piece in the video itself and allow people to have a point of view. Sometimes I'll disagree with them, sometimes I'll agree with them. But I don't want people to expect me to get into a long back and forth debate because it is simply too time consuming, and I don't believe that's what comment sections are about. But I do appreciate all the feedback. In terms of the volume issue, I'm aware it does go up and down. I'm aware that it's not ideal. Hopefully, my financial situation will improve this year. If it does, I might end up getting a whole new laptop, and then the whole dynamics will change probably. Um, there were a few points in 2017 I got a little bit tired of cyberspace in general, so I may limit the number of videos I make. I don't know. Um, what else can I say? I don't do requests simply because I need to be in the mood to talk about something if I'm going to talk about it. So I appreciate that sort of feedback, but I don't do requests because I think you really need to be thinking about a subject rather than just talk about it because it's been requested. Although certainly some of the ideas are good ideas. Um, and finally, regarding trolls, I've had a few. Um, there were two few times in the past, I'll be honest, they got under my skin. Well, with such people, I'm either going to simply block their comments, allow their comments for others to see how ridiculous they are, or simply ignore them. I mean, if you disagree with what I'm saying, that's fine. But I would honestly ask questions about people who spend so much time on a channel that they blatantly don't like. So if you disagree with my views on keeping the United Kingdom together, I strongly, staunchly, 120% believe in one United Kingdom. So if you're on the polar opposite and you believe in Scottish independence, fine. But don't expect to convert me. Don't expect me to change my view. It won't happen. Okay? I'll allow you to have your opinion if it's civil, but people need to understand this is my channel. It's almost like an open diary in a sense, and certain things aren't going to change. So that's that. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I wish you all the best for 2018, and I just hope it's a progressive year as much as possible for the world and for everyone watching this, and for myself, my family, and my friends. Thank you for watching. Best wishes.